warm welcome to Diski Talk with Luyolo. If you're tuning in for the very first time, I ask that you please subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you've been a part of this journey, I hope you thoroughly enjoy this episode. So, on today's episode, I discuss all things MTN 8 WAFA WAFA. Game that I am going to have a tactical preview of is Mamelodi Sundowns versus Kaizer Chiefs, the most anticipated fixture of the MTN 8 quarterfinal. So when we then have a look going into this game, you've got Mamelodi Sundowns, who have never won the MTN 8. We do know that they struggle in this competition, and in the past couple of years, they just haven't been able to stamp their authority within the MTN 8. And then when we have a look at Kaizer Chiefs, former winners of the MTN 8, they've done really well within this format. And Mamelodi Sundowns will want to start the season off positively, and will want to register a win, especially over Kaizer Chiefs. The same could be said for Kaizer Chiefs, as we do know that they have strengthened and they'll be looking to compete on all fronts. But the conversation for today's episode is the MTN 8. So without wasting any time, let's get straight into the tactical preview. So we do have the red team, which will represent Kaizer Chiefs, and then the blue team, which will represent Mamelodi Sundowns. So then I will then start with Kaizer Chiefs. So with regards then to Kaizer Chiefs, and let's just get a goalkeeper in there to make things fair. So with regards to Kaizer Chiefs and how they could potentially line up. So we do know that Stuart Baxter is the man at the helm. So with Stuart Baxter, one of his most preferred systems is the 4-2-3-1, where he has a double pivot in midfield, or he could go with a back three, but so far he's been consistent with the back four. We saw it in the final against Al Ahly and in the Carling Black Label Cup against the London Pirates in the second half, where he maintained the back four shape. So let's then have a look at what he might potentially do. So just to note at home, this might not be exact because we haven't seen Kaizer Chiefs consistently play. We've only seen a couple of games so far. But as the season progresses, the analysis with regards to the starting lineup of Stuart Baxter and who he prefers will be a lot more accurate. But now we're going based on what he potentially likes and how he would like to impose himself when it comes to this MTN 8 game against Mamelodi Sundowns. So in goals, they've got, in goals it can be Kune, it can be Bruce, or it can be Peterson. So in goals, I'm not really going to pin my my expectation on one goalkeeper, because it could be any of those three, you know. So any of those three in goals, and then at left back, I can guarantee you it will be Santi to start at left back, as the left-sided centre back could be Cardoso. That's who I think you'll go with. As the right-sided centre half, I see him going with Jabulo Ngobo. And then as the right back, you could go with Frosla, or you could go with the experience of Ramasho Mphahlele if he wants to be a bit more on the conservative side. So then in midfield, when we have a look at the double pivot. So in midfield, I think the double pivot will be Patucheza Nange and Cole Alexander. So I say that because in the Carling Black Label Cup, we did see that in the second half he introduced these two players and they went right into the heart of the midfield. And Stuart Baxter, in my opinion, is a tactically safe coach. So having then a double pivot to protect that back four and to also circulate the ball in midfield and look to boss things in midfield would bode Kaizer Chiefs very well with regards to growing into the game, especially against the Mamelodi Sundowns team, which is known to overload the central zones, occupy the half spaces, and look to penetrate those central channels. So a double pivot it will be of Patucheza Nange and Cole Alexander. And when we look at them from a workmanship perspective, they are two players who work very hard, A. B, Kaizer Chiefs don't have a defensive midfielder who specializes in this position. So going with the double pivot of both these players is the best option for Kaizer Chiefs and Stuart Baxter. And then when we progress into the offensive third, I think you'll go with the three behind a striker. So the three then being Khama Billiat coming off the left. In the Carling Black Label Cup, when I did the preview of that match, I did mention that you could see Khama Billiat drifting to the left because that's what he likes to do, and then coming onto his favored right side. So that is where Khama Billiat will start. And then on the right-hand side, I do see Khaukhelo Sikhota starting as the right winger. He did very well for me against Orlando Pirates in the second half of the Carling Black Label Cup. Very explosive, very dynamic. He can cut in, he can go on the outside, and he's a player who's got an eye for goal. So I think he starts on the right-hand side. What becomes very interesting here is that there's a few options here. You know, and a player that I want to focus on and would like to think will start is Mngqithi Rulani. That's who I'd go with as my number 10 as the attacking midfielder. And I say this because I think within Kaizer Chiefs currently, he's the best in this position, and it's his natural position where he would be able then to occupy the half spaces, occupy zone 14 and the central channels. He will be able to get onto the ball, dictate terms. And I think this time around, going into the season, I think he's better suited when he has a double pivot sitting behind him and protecting him. And I say that because often at times he has been started out wide and then he would have license to come in, but we saw that he's not as comfortable as when he starts in the heart of midfield looking to attack. And I think that's his favorite position. That's where he will start for this game. And then up front, we'll have definitely Nukovic, the target man. Do know Stuart Baxter likes going with a traditional number 9 up front. However, just to have a look at it from a different perspective, because they are coming up against Mamelodi Sundowns. So in the midfield, if Stuart Baxter wanted to be very conservative, to say we'll sit back and hit them on the counter, he could then go with a Blom in midfield. And then you've got a very defensive midfield, but you still have the outlet of Billiat and Khaukhelo Sikhota and Nukovic. They could hit them on the counter, especially because Mamelodi Sundowns will most likely have the bulk of the ball possession. So that's how I think they could do it. But I do see a double pivot of Patucheza Nange and Mngqithi Rulani as the number 10. So then when we then move on to Mamelodi Sundowns, in goals, I think we'll have Onyango. Yeah, pretty much this Mamelodi Sundowns side, it picks itself. This is based off the most consistent lineup last season and the most consistent players within the side as well. So in goals, Onyango. Yes, Mamelodi Sundowns do adopt a 3-4-3, which at times transitions to a 4-3-3 and vice versa. But I will start it off as a 3-4-3 because that's what it is essentially. So the three at the back, you've got Rushin Duruk, you've got Musa Lebusa, you have Rivaldo Kutia who will drop in there when he does advance. The two wing backs tuck in, the two centre backs tuck in. That's when you see it go to a 4-3-3. But the general shape is Rivaldo Kutia dropping in there to collect the ball and start play. Those are the three at the back. Your right wing back, you've got Tapelo Morena. Your left wing back, you've got Lila K. And then in the heart of midfield, you have Mabowe, you have Spelele Mkulisi. And then your front three, you're looking at Themba Zwane, you're looking at Shalulile, and then you've got Gaston Serino. That's who you're looking at from that perspective. So then when we then have a look at some of the key players from both sides, I'll start with Sundowns. So with Sundowns, because they'll have the lion's share of the ball possession, you're looking at Rushin Duruk and Lebusa and Rivaldo Kutia being very important when it comes to the developing of the game, the building up of the game. So they will look to obviously get onto the ball and start play, dictate from deep. And it's going to be very interesting to see what Kaizer Chiefs do. Do they press them high, or do they have sort of a mid-block where they will then allow Mamelodi Sundowns to play, and then once it progresses into this section, then they look to win the ball back? Or will they sit deep and allow Sundowns to come to them, or will they press them? That's going to be something very interesting to look out for, especially in the first 15 minutes. So then when we have then a look at Sundowns and we move it into the midfield, so when we then have a look at Spelele Mkulisi and Maboe, they are very important at getting onto the ball and making this Mamelodi Sundowns team tick. So very important then when they progress the ball into the final third, progress the ball into your Themba Zwane, progress the ball into your Serino. So also very important when it comes to the counter pressing as well, and I think that's why they start ahead of all the other midfielders within that Mamelodi Sundowns setup, is because they do both sides very well on and off the ball, and tactically, technically, they are superior, and they are very, very versatile. They can adapt to each and every single phase of the game when required. So when we then have a look at the wing backs, Thapelo Morena on this side, do know that he occupies this whole right-hand side. It belongs to him. It is his home. And what he will be instrumental for is making sure that he keeps the width on the right-hand side for Mamelodi Sundowns, and that he stretches the pitch as wide as possible, especially when Sundowns tend to overload the central zones. So when we have a look then at Lila K, same thing. Very important at stretching the pitch for Mamelodi Sundowns, keeping the width on the left-hand side, allowing your Serino, allowing then your Mkulisi to come into this half space on the left-hand side to occupy, to play, and then obviously drawing the winger, and having the fullback being concerned as to, do I go or do I maintain? And with the wing as well, do I go and press him? If I do, it opens up then space for maybe either a Serino to operate. If Serino does go up, then Kulisi will come into that place, into sort of that half space to occupy that position, pick up the ball and dictate. So many possibilities and so many options that your Lila K and your Thapelo Morena give you, especially when they keep the width for Mamelodi Sundowns, especially in those half spaces and in those inner channels. They allow Mamelodi Sundowns to do all their work in those channels. And then coming up front, I think Shalulile will be very important, especially when it comes to testing, who I think will be a very key player, and Jabulo Mngqithi. I do see him getting his debut against Mamelodi Sundowns. I see him getting right into the thick of things. I think he's going to be very important at testing these two and stretching them, making those runs in behind, and obviously occupying zone 14, keeping them busy. And then when we have a look at Serino and Themba Zwane, as always, very instrumental when it comes to their link-up play, very instrumental when it comes to them looking to combine, looking to get Mamelodi Sundowns into the game, looking to get them those goals, and looking to get Shalulile in on goal and getting those goals that he always gets. So then when we have a look at the personnel of Kaizer Chiefs, so when we have a look at Kaizer Chiefs, I think at the back, they're going to have to be very solid. very tight. And that's why I think Ramahlwe Mphahlele could possibly start, because he's a lot more conservative. Defensively, he is better than Reeve Frosler. So I think that's why he will start. And to complement Ashanti who likes going, and when he goes, Billiat comes in. So I think Kaizer Chiefs on the right-hand side, they'll be a bit more defensive, especially the threat of Lila K when he overlaps. Sereno, who likes to occupy this left half space, sometimes Zwane as well. Sometimes they do have a lopsided approach where they overload the one side. So I think they'll be very defensive and conservative on this side. These two, very important with regards to how they read the game, very important with regards to how they engage the front three of Mamelodi Sundowns, especially when they pop up into the half spaces. How will they deal with that, you know? And it does get confusing for certain teams, because the fullback thinks, do I come in and then pick up that man, or does the centre back go? But if the centre back goes, it opens up a space. That's when you see Shalulile occupying that channel, occupying zone 14, getting in behind and scoring those goals. So I think Kadoso and Ngobo will be very pivotal, and especially when it comes to reading of the game. And then when we have a look at Patucheza Nange, Cole Alexander, I mentioned them because I think they'll be the most important players in this game because of how Mamelodi Sundowns play. So let's have a look at it then when Mamelodi Sundowns would be in their half, because I think they'll have the lion's share of possession. So you have Mamelodi Sundowns high up, as always. You've got Rivaldo Kotsia. I think Ngobo will have to drop in a bit deep to help out. And then you've got Rivaldo Kotsia there. You've got Musa Lebus as your left-sided centre half. You've got Rishun Deruk as your right-sided centre half. So I think then this is more or less the shape that we will see for most of the game, by virtue of the fact that Mamelodi Sundowns will have the ball possession. So when we have a look at it from this perspective, Mamelodi Sundowns always look to dominate proceedings. They always look to dominate the ball possession. And why then I think Patucheza Nange and Cole Alexander will be very important is monitoring the half spaces. Very important, because this is where Themba Zwane likes to pop up. This is where Sereno likes to pop up. And sometimes they overload. Sometimes you'll find that Mkhulisi will join, Sereno will be there, and Shalulile will be there. Or sometimes Shalulile will just stretch, keep his position to occupy those. Themba Zwane joins, and they overload. So when they overload, Patucheza Nange, Cole Alexander, very important with regards to how do they react, how do they deal with it, because Sundowns have become very, very good at occupying and manipulating the half spaces, especially when you look at Mngqithi and when you look at Sereno. So that's why I think Cole Alexander, Patucheza Nange will be very important. And then when we then advance and we have a look at Kaizer Chiefs from this perspective with regards to how do they get out. Ngosiphile Ngobo, very good at holding the ball. He can buy you a foul. He can buy you those 5 to 6 seconds, especially in these situations. Very good at protecting the ball, and can also get you that defense splitting pass, which gets Kaizer Chiefs away on the counter-attack. So when you then have a look at Billiat and Sukhota, their pace will be very important when it comes to how do they break away, how do they counter-attack. And then, of course, Nukovic trying to get in at the end of that cross or at the end of that pass that would be made to end off the phase of play, which would be a counter-attack. So then when we have a look at the key players, and from each side, I'm going to highlight one key player from each side and who I think will be very, very important in this game. Yes, I did mention certain players. I went through each and every single player with regards to their roles, with regards to their duties, and why they will be important. But it's paramount that I pick out the key player from each side. So let's just have Sundowns going back to their half. Go back, guys. And let's have that sort of perfect 3-4-3 shape that they would normally have. And then have Chiefs in their 4-2-3-1. So when we then have a look at who will be a key player for Mamelodi Sundowns, I am looking at Themba Zwane. And look, big game player going into the MTN 8 Cup competition. I think he'll want to win this one. It's the one that he doesn't have in his trophy cabinet, and if he could get the MTN 8, it completes the stellar trophy cabinet that he has. And big match player, he is a player who does very well whenever he is expected to come up with the goods, especially now when you look at a new partnership in midfield. I think he can run these guys riot in midfield, especially in the half spaces, how he could manipulate the ball, how he could occupy those half spaces. So for Mamelodi Sundowns, I've pinpointed Themba Zwane as the key player. And then when we then have a look at Kaizer Chiefs, I think Cole Alexander will be their key player. I say that because from both a defensive and offensive perspective. So defensively, very important with regards to how does he keep up with the movement and the interchange and the fluid positional play that Mamelodi Sundowns would usually institute in and around the final third, especially in the half spaces and in zone 14. And then from an offensive perspective, when he does get onto the ball, how does he control the game? How does he maximize his passes? Because I think Kaizer Chiefs will be very limited from an offensive perspective. So whenever Cole Alexander does get onto the ball, with his quality, with his tactical and technical acumen, how does he make the best of the ball? You know, and a player who also has an eye for goal, who can get your goal from far out, how does he then make use of the ball on the day? So those are the two key players to watch out for coming into this MTN 8 fixture. However, ladies and gentlemen, it is then the extra time segment where I predict who will advance to the semi-final of the MTN 8. So, ladies and gentlemen, you do know that on Disky Talk with Liolo, we keep it as objective as possible all the time. So the winner for this game will be Mamelodi Sundowns. I see them winning 2-1. So, ladies and gentlemen, do let me know, what do you make of this encounter and who do you think will win this game? Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first on Disky Talk with Liolo. I predict that Mamelodi Sundowns will win this game 2-1 and advance to the MTN 8 semi-final. Thank you very much for tuning in to yet another special episode of Disky Talk with Liolo. Signing out.